Oh, again, one of the things that I find quite frustrating perhaps is the time it takes to get fit. Like, obviously I want to be fitter and faster, and also I find that with the athletes that I coach, they obviously want to reach certain goals, but you can't just decide to be fitter or decide to be faster. You have to go through the process of doing the training, recovering, adapting, and doing the training again. It's that step-by-step process that's important to understand and follow. The Banister impulse response model is quite a good way to illustrate this, and also illustrate how you might actually be able to speed up the way you get fitter and reach your goals a little bit faster, or actually reach higher goals. So this is a sort of my representation of this impulse response model, and what you can see is that when you do this, the sort of lines, or the red line is of a positive effect. So when you do a training session, the theory is that you get fitter instantly, and it's the only reason you can't perform is because you're tired. Obviously that doesn't happen, physiologically it takes time for things to change, but this is quite a good representation of how things work. And the way you get fitter is because the decay in this fitness, you keep your fitness for longer than you keep your tiredness. So the red line, the negative response, is the fatigue, and then the black line is just the difference between the two. So this can be anything. In TrainingPeaks, we use TrainingPeaks. It uses something called TSS, Training Stress Score. Strava uses Fitness and Freshness. We can just look at those charts. But the things in TrainingPeaks and Strava they're cumulative things, whereas this chart illustrates just one training session, which I just thought would be a better way of illustrating it. So you can see here, this is this recovery time. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, put it in there. So it takes a certain amount to recover, and if you then train again, you're a little bit fitter. If you train at that point, that peak point, you're a little bit fitter. So you get the same fitness gain. You get the same fatigue. If it's the same intensity and volume of training, same training stress, I suppose. You then the difference between the two, and then you reach another fitness. So you can see that if you train, recover, and then train, and then recover again, your fitness gradually increases. Obviously it's specific to the type of training you do, so these performance management charts aren't perfect, but I think this is a nice way to illustrate this. So what's important to note is this recovery, because if you're a certain level of fitness and you do a certain training session, then what happens here, the gain in fitness, or the positive response and the negative response, aren't going to change very much. But if you recover more effectively, then you can reduce this recovery time, and therefore the steps get shorter, and you can get fitter faster by accumulating more training load. And obviously that was a good way to build your fitness. Anyway, hopefully that's interesting and useful for you. So when you train, you damage your body, and it builds back a little bit stronger during that recovery period. So by taking these steps, you get fitter and fitter. So by doing good things like having good nutrition and getting proper sleep and relaxing, mentally, not getting overly stressed, then you can sort of reduce this recovery time perhaps, and in that way then you can get fitter faster. If you do too much and then try to train before you properly recovered, then you're going to run into problems and just get increasing the fatigue and ill. So hopefully that makes the point, and I think this sort of single step Banister model, impulse response model, is quite a good way of illustrating that. The online training diaries like Strava and TrainingPeaks use this sort of basis to, although the algorithms are slightly different and the mathematics are slightly different, to make an estimate of your level of fitness and how things are progressing and how tired you are and all these other factors. So you can use these. Don't use them as absolute numbers, because there's various flaws. I mean, they're just mathematical models. They don't know how quickly you're recovering, or whether you've had a really bad night, or you've been out to the pub or nightclubbing all night. So just have to take that into account and use them as a guide rather than an absolute. So Strava has the fitness and freshness curve, and it makes an estimate of what it thinks your fitness is, what it thinks your fatigue is, and what it thinks your form is, which is basically the difference between the two. And you can see this is a chart here. This is me. It starts And I started doing a bit more training in March. I've had a couple of years when I've not been very well and I've not been able to train, but things are going quite nicely now. The thing to remember from these charts is that the things that they call fitness isn't necessarily fitness. If it's like here, it's 46 on my chart. If it was 146, it wouldn't necessarily mean that I was fitter. I might be just not able to handle that volume of training. It's more of I quite like the term that TrainingPeaks used to use, but it's now shifted a bit towards fitness, is a chronic training load, which is basically the amount of training you've done over a long time. So it's basically your overall training volume. And that can be a good indication of how well things are going. And talking about TrainingPeaks, here's the performance management chart in TrainingPeaks for the last year. And you can see that I've had an abortive attempt to get fitter, and then I had some time off after Christmas. I got ill, I got food poisoning at Christmas, unbelievably, Christmas Day in bed. And then things picked up nicely and I've been training quite well and I've done a couple of events. So you can see in TrainingPeaks the red dots are the training stress score for the particular day, and the blue dots are intensity factor, and that's basically how intense it thinks you've been training. So you can see I did these big high values here where the what they call acute training load, the response, the negative response is fatigue, and it went right up, and what they call the form, which is the difference between the overall training, your chronic training load, and your acute training load. So your negative and your positive responses give you an idea of what your form is. So after that big event, I'd had a big impulse and I was quite tired. And similarly, I had another event this weekend, which I think hopefully I'll do a video about, not the event, but the preparation and things that we could, if you do certain events, then how it's important to take control of the situation. And Claire and I made a few mistakes about this last weekend race where she did the French Championships and I did a mountain bike marathon, and I think it might be useful to talk about that and how you might be able to learn from those experiences. So if you want to see that, then please subscribe, and you'll get informed of it if you click the bell icon. So at the weekend it was a bigger race. You can see from a bigger training stress score, but because I've reached a higher level of fitness, it didn't cause as much of a acute load, and the form didn't drop quite as much. So I'm recovering from it a little bit better because I'm fitter, because I'm used to doing more volume. And then there are the more sophisticated analytical tools like WKO5 and Golden Cheetah. So this is WKO5 for the same period of time I've just shown you in TrainingPeaks, and it nicely highlights in red where your chronic training load's low and in green where it's high. And also, because the charts in WKO are customizable, you can show the different values, different peak values, and you can see here that peak 60-minute normalized power has been reasonably good over the last period of time, but my higher short-term values were better last year, a little bit later in the year. But the reason for these things is because it might be because you've not done a 5-minute high-intensity effort or a 20-minute high-intensity effort. And since I started training harder again, I haven't done any 20-minute tests. So if I did a 20-minute test, it would show a peak now. But so you have to be quite careful about these charts because they're only as good as the data that you're putting into them. And then you can get a similar chart in Golden Cheetah, and it has other built-in charts that are quite useful and just have different bases for the mathematics, and that can be quite nice. You can get an actual, I was just been playing about with the Banister chart to see how that works. I'm not certainly fully finished what I'm doing, but if you look on the Golden Cheetah website, there's a video that explains how to use the Banister model, and that can give you predictions. And the example that they use is it'll predict your critical power, which is sort of roughly the same as your FTP. This chart I've done here predicts critical power estimates. It looks reasonably accurate based on the information I've got from the data, my training data. So hopefully that's useful. So we started with the step-by-step approach, the Banister model, impulse response model that shows that you can gradually build your fitness step by step. By you train, you get a positive and a negative response. Train again, you get another positive and negative response, and in that way you're gradually stepping up your fitness. And using this model you can actually make predictions, but you have to tune the variables, and I'm not going to go into that here, but actually in that Golden Cheetah video I mentioned that goes into those details. So by improving your recoveries, you can contract that time, you can gradually build your fitness, so you can increase your training volume, and therefore you can increase your performance in your goal events. So hopefully that's useful, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.